I imagine many of us felt some personal response to Sue's beautiful reading of that text from Jeremiah, an expression of the prophet's grief and sorrow, as we have this week lost another very important and beloved member of our congregation, Kate Karkowski. On top of those that we have already lost in recent months, and those who are battling life-threatening illness. But Jeremiah is not speaking to our personal grief, as much as we might feel it personally, but to the grief of his whole people, to the sorrow of a nation, to an illness that seems incurable. The harvest has come, the summer has passed, and yet in a time which should be one of celebration, of feasting, of laying down the tools of the field and enjoying the fruits of the earth, the people go around with heaviness and sorrow in their hearts. And I think of our own nation, so afflicted in so many ways. The recent announcement that for the second year in a row, the average life expectancy in our country dropped significantly, the lowest level in over 25 years. But this is a symptom of a greater disease. It's due not only to COVID, of course, but to the number of needless deaths from that pandemic, bred by people's mistrust of one another, their disbelief in the voices of authority in science and medicine and academia and government, due also to the continuing plague of drug addiction and drug overdoses, symptoms of deep despair afflicting so many of our communities, so many of our people. Here in Petaluma, I had a meeting yesterday with some of our Afghan ally friends. And I have to say, I secretly hoped that I would come back from my sabbatical this summer and that miraculously they would have all found stable housing to live in, but of course that was not the case. And as the foundation that has been sponsoring them has set a very firm date beyond which they will no longer be paying their rent. For some it's in October, for others in November, and some in December. We're starting to feel a great sense of urgency, as of course they are even more deeply, about how are they going to find affordable places to live here in Sonoma County, where they have begun to make a home, where their children are now beginning a second year in elementary school, doing very well, learning, where they are learning to drive, women, and otherwise well connected, thanks in large part to our own efforts in this community. And they could, if worse came to worse, pack up and go elsewhere. But Why shouldn't they be able to live here? What disease afflicts our community that we're unable to open doorways of welcome to people who have allied themselves with our own foreign policy objectives and risked their lives because of their belief in modernity, their belief in an Islam that is not a fundamentalist fanaticism, their belief that women and girls should have rights and be able to be educated. They embraced those values at personal risk. And when Kabul fell to the Taliban, they fled for their lives. And they ended up here. So why shouldn't they become our neighbors? Why are they in fear of falling into homelessness? Just like the manager in the gospel story today, in Jesus' parable that he speaks to his disciples after he's been confronted by the scribes and the Pharisees for his practice of welcoming strangers, welcoming the lost, welcoming the tax collectors and the notorious sexual sinners, the prostitutes, and eating with them. So he's told the Pharisees and the scribes about the lost sheep and the lost coin and the younger son who went off, asked for his share of his inheritance and went off to a foreign land and squandered it on loose living. Now has come home and falls before his father, begging to be taken in, just to be taken in, just to have a roof over his head and food to eat. Of course, the father rushes out when he sees him coming on the road and embraces him. Gives him so much more than he was asking for. But now Jesus turns to his disciples and tells them this strange story that's so difficult to interpret about this dishonest steward, supposedly. Although one wonders, he's been accused of wasting his master's wealth, but he clearly hasn't squirreled any of it away for himself. Because at the prospect of losing his job, he fears that he will be homeless. But he hits on a plan that is perhaps a key to understanding what wealth is really for, which seems to be, from the sayings that follow, really the point of this passage. And perhaps a key to understanding something about the disease, the deeper disease that afflicts not just our community, but our whole nation. A misunderstanding of what money really is for, what wealth is really about. And that parallel to the economy, as we like to call it, which is so much about money, anxiety about money, scarcity of money, carefully manipulated, the acquisition and accumulation of more and more and more money by those who already have it. Parallel to this economy, there is God's economy. An economy of grace that understands that the purpose of money is not just to facilitate exchange of goods and services, but it is to build community. It is to strengthen relationships. It is to make belonging possible. And so the dishonest steward goes to the debtors of his master, and he discounts their debt. It's worth noting that he discounts it at different rates. For the one who owes the 100 measures of oil, it's a 50% discount. For the one who owes the 100 measures of wheat, it's just a 20% discount. It's not a flat rate. And why would these debtors be inclined to take this man into their homes just because he saved them 50 measures of oil or 20 measures of wheat? Well, I don't know, but perhaps it's because this man understands that money is about belonging. It's about relationships. And he understands that the situation of each one of these debtors. And for the one who owes the oil, the 50% discount is what that person needs in order to actually be able to pay off the debt, to clear the books, so he's no longer indebted to the landowner. And at the same time can feel like he's done something. It wasn't just given to him, but he was able to maintain his honor and his dignity and pay that 50% of what he owes and get free and clear. Whereas for the one who owes the 100 measures of wheat, all that person needs is the 20% discount in God's economy of grace. So we're trying to do what we can for our Afghan ally friends, not to take over paying their rent, but to make up the difference between what they can now afford to pay themselves and what they will continue to need to pay at the place where they're currently staying until such time as they're able to move into a place that's more affordable. We'll be reaching out to people throughout the community, asking them to help us do this. Because it matters to us, this economy of grace. And because we want to be a sign to our whole community of what money is really good for. Good for enabling belonging, for making reconciliation of relationships possible. Because our true belonging has nothing to do with what belongs to us. Everything that we possess, all our belongings, truly belong to another. Have simply been entrusted to us for God's purposes. What really matters is who we belong to. Where do we ultimately belong? Being Christians, we think we know the answer. We want other people to know it too. It's not about what belongs to you, it's about who you belong to. And how can you use your belongings to invite others to know that, to trust it, to live for it, to hope